Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. We are going to have yet another one of our late night conversations. It's so good to be here with all of you tonight. Thanks for being patient. A little bit later than we intended to start, but I think we're good. So I'm glad to be here with all of you. Let's have yet another late night chat.
The American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, 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 folks. I am glad to be here with all of you tonight. Should be yet another great late night conversation. We're going to talk about current events. You know, hey, we do these a lot. We do these almost every night if we can. We might even start doing two a day again. We'll see, but we're going to keep doing them because our community is important. I feel very connected to all of you. What we do here is very much a collective effort. If I just wanted to just spout off and talk, I would just talk into my camera and upload it afterwards. But what we do here is really a joint operation. Our community has a lot of people in it. At least 1,000 people watch all of these streams. We're a very important part of each other's lives, and I value each and every one of you. And I thank you for all the support and all the efforts that we have made. All that we've achieved over the past few years. Our community has grown, we've expanded, we've overcome difficulties and challenges. We are marching ahead, and we are not going to stop. That is one thing we are not going to do, is stop. We are marching ahead. Dare to struggle, dare to win, as we always say at the Center for Political Innovation. Great videos of our Center for Political Innovation National Convention have already been posted, and there's going to be more coming soon. There's going to be more. Right now, we're live on Rumble, Rockfin, and on YouTube. And we've got some exciting stuff happening. So first announcement, just want to throw out there, this book continues to break records, right? I told you last night about how amazingly this book is doing, but never quit while you're ahead. Never quit while you're ahead. Let's keep this book. Who are the Houthis? What are they fighting for? Let's make it the topic of conversation that it needs to be. The only book of its kind, of an amazing breakthrough on the part of CPI. This book is really, really something special, an anti-imperialist case for why the Houthis are our friends. And in light of current events, such as the bombing of Gaza and the bombing of Yemen, the relentless bombing of Yemen, the illegal bombing of Yemen, which we're going to talk about later tonight, it becomes very, very important. So, yeah, this is the book, and we need to get the truth about the Houthis and who they are and what they're fighting for out there. Everyone who's read the book loves it. You can get it at any bookstore. Just tell them the name and author. It's on Amazon, but if you don't want to patronize Amazon, you can get it at any bookstore. Very exciting, folks. Let's spread the truth. There we go. So there's that. The other thing that's an important announcement I wanted to share with all of you is if you are part of the Center for Political Innovation or you like the message of these streams, there's going to be a great IRL in real life event coming up. That is our National Educational Workshop, our national training school that we are having in the U.S. state of Vermont. And that will be happening on April 26th through April 29th. And it's going to be a very, very, very important weekend. It's going to be very, very, very exciting. Right now, there's a reading group that's happening over our first textbook, We Are City Builders. Well, there's going to be another reading group taking place. And, there's a reading group happening. But our second textbook will be out for this great weekend gathering. It's going to be 4 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday in Vermont at a new, beautiful facility that we have access to. So if you would like to attend, please sign up. Please sign up so we know how many people to expect. We obviously are going to, if you sign up, we'll call you. We'll talk to you a little bit. And we need to know who's coming. It's very important. April's a long time away, but time is of the essence. And the more that you do, the more we get to prepare. So there you go. The sooner you sign up. So our national gathering coming up in Vermont, please sign up so that we know you're coming. It's going to be a great weekend. You'll get to know CPI and our community, what we're all about. You'll get to be part of some great classes and group bonding activities. The link to sign up is in the link I just sent. So it's going to be very, very awesome. So you don't want to miss it. And those are the two announcements about our new book and about the National Educational Workshop that's coming up. We have a lot of activities planned for this summer. There's a lot. These next couple months are going to be crucial. I'm headed to Russia at the end of February for the World Youth Festival. And then after that, we'll be heading right into our national workshop, our educational workshop. And then from there, we're headed to protest NATO in DC. We're headed to the Democrat and Republican national conventions, Republicans first, and then Democrats after that. A lot of very, very exciting things in the works. We need you in the struggle. All right. You belong in the struggle. You belong in history's challenge, taking up history's challenge. We would like to bring you into a community, and this is the community. This is the organization. We are not simply building a social media brand here. We are building a community of solidarity and resistance. So, sign up, come to our national gathering, become a member of the Center for Political Innovation if you haven't joined yet. Our organization is marching ahead. We're having great gatherings. We're doing great stuff. So there's that. Just wanted to let you know all about that. The way these live streams work, for those of you who may not be familiar, I give my opening remarks, which is what it is that I want to talk about for the evening. As I do that, people's questions come in. Rumble rants, Rockfin tips, super chats. We got one super chat so far about supporting independent media. If there's something you would like me to speak about in the second half of our program, by all means, send a Rockfin tip, a Rumble rant, or a super chat. So first I give my opening remarks, then we do the roll call where we find out who's on the other side of the camera, who it is. And then after that, we go and answer people's questions for the rest of the night. So if there's something you'd like me to talk about on the second half of the show, send me a super chat, Rumble rant, or Rockfin tip. That's the best way to get me to do that. So with no further ado, I am going to jump in to my opening remarks for tonight. Folks, the United States has continued its illegal attacks on Iraq, Syria, and Yemen. They have been bombing those three countries all weekend with absolutely no legal basis for doing so. The USA has forces in Syria that are there without the permission of the internationally recognized government. The USA has forces in Iraq that are in that country without the permission of the internationally recognized government. And the USA is bombing Yemen on the flimsy basis that they have the right to protect the travel of ships through the Red Sea, when that is not what the UN resolution said. While the UN said, yeah, we don't approve of the Houthis stopping ships, it didn't say, oh, and that means the USA can bomb them and kill them. That's not what they said. The USA is murdering people in Yemen. It is murdering people in Syria, and it's murdering people in Iraq. And they're trying to say they didn't kill any civilians. And that's bullshit. Civilians who got killed, their family members have been on RT giving interviews. It's bullshit. They're getting up before the world and say, oh, well, we didn't kill any civilians. Yes, you did. Yes, you did. You did kill civilians when you attacked Syria. You did kill civilians when you attacked Iraq. You did kill civilians in Yemen. And the USA is bombing these three countries, targeting groups that are aligned with Iran. And they're trying to say that Iran gives these groups orders and tells them what to do. Well, Iran may give some weapons and financial support to these groups, but these groups are not 100% beholden to Iran. They have their own religious beliefs. They have their own interests, right? The Zaydi Shia Muslims of Yemen are not the same kind of religion as the Iranian Ayatollahs are. They have a different interpretation of the faith. The Houthi movement goes back very far. You can read the history of it in my book. The Qatar Hezbollah in Iraq, the self-defense organization that Shia Muslims made to protect their communities against ISIS, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and Hezbollah forces that have gone into Syria to support the Syrian government, the Syrian Arab Republic, that is a Ba'athist Arab socialist government. It is just a lie that all these people, while they might get some backing or support from Iran, are on, just taking orders from Iran. These are military dispatches of Iran. They are not, okay? And they're trying to make it sound that way, when in reality, these movements are more or less the people of all these different countries asserting their national liberation. The Houthis, they've got a coalition government that they've set up there, the Revolutionary Committee, that has Marxists in it, that's got pacifists in it, that's got, Arab nationalists in it. The Hezbollah organization aligns itself with different Christian groups in Lebanon, with different anti-imperialist forces. You've got in Iraq these community self-defense groups that have been formed to protect their communities from ISIS. In Syria, you've got the Syrian Arab Republic, which is a Ba'athist Arab socialist government. The Ba'ath party is the ruling party. You've got the Syrian Social Nationalist Party. You've got the Syrian Communist Party and the Syrian Communist Party, Bakdash. You've got different forces. The idea that these folks are all just agents of Iran is absolutely ridiculous. And Hezbollah in Lebanon, it was formed as a self-defense organization. When in the early 80s, Israel invaded Lebanon, among Lebanese people who wanted to protect their communities, they formed various self-defense groups that eventually merged into one organization called Hezbollah. The leader of Hezbollah is Hassan Nasrallah. And Hezbollah, at this point, is on guard because it looks like Israel may be planning another invasion of Lebanon. Now, Israel has invaded Lebanon a number of times over the past few decades. And the last time in particular, it got, just humiliated, destroyed by the Hezbollah organization. They just drove them out. It was an epic defeat for Israel at the hands of the Lebanese people, led by the Hezbollah organization. So this whole situation is very, very extreme. The United States still tries to claim this is all self-defense. How is it self-defense for the United States to bomb countries on the other side of the world where they have troops without the permission of the government? If the Iraqi government says, get out, and you're still there, how is it then self-defense for your troops to attack somebody? I mean, the Syrian government says, get out, and you're there. How is it self-defense for you to then attack people in Syria? There is no basis on this claim that this is self-defense. The attacks on Yemen are in particular, but this is a clip that recently came out of a spokesman for the Yemen government describing the U.S. attacks and the context of them. Very hard-hitting language.
Open way, without any shame. They no longer know how to lie. When they come from 9,000 miles to launch an aggression on Yemen and then say that they defend themselves and they are protecting international shipping. The lie of international shipping, my colleagues, is not the only lie regarding the events taking place. America, which accuses us of threatening international shipping, it is the same one which said that it doesn't have information or evidence that the Israeli entity is committing massacres against the Palestinians in Gaza. It is the one that said that the children, victims from amongst the children, are zero. It says this whilst the massacres are being committed all the time and openly, live, and then it comes and lies and says it's protecting international shipping. Sana'a is the last party which could be accused of doing this. This false American accusation. Sana'a has proven that it cares for or protecting for the international shipping for the last few years, as it was in the midst of the war. The current conflict, and this is what we want the whole world to understand, the current conflict taking place is between good intentions represented by Yemen and the evil intentions represented by the United States of America and Britain. America's lies are well known. His history is full of lies, and when we talk about America, this includes necessarily Britain. However, we will focus on America considering that Britain is always affiliated and is a tail of the United States of America. Throughout America's history, all of the wars, all of the sorrows which it spread throughout the world, it always relied on lies. It relied on lies. Ever since its founding, ever since 1848, when it invaded Mexico based on a fabricated accusation which it later on admitted to, that it was lying. So it's good that later on they admit that they were lying. And also in 1896 we had the famous lie of the American ship, which they relied on in order to attack the Spanish. And they attacked the Spanish, and they attacked Cuba, and they attacked the Philippines based on a lie which they later on admitted to. And the same applies to the surveillance plane, the crisis, the well-known crisis of the surveillance plane with the Soviet Union in 1960, and the Vietnam War. It fought Vietnam and it invaded Vietnam. It launched an aggression on Vietnam based on a lie of targeting American ships. In 2005, a report was issued which relies on the official accounts and also the accounts from the ground, and they all concluded via this report that this was a fabricated lie. And it invaded Vietnam and committed massacres in Vietnam based on a lie. And the same applies to the aggression on Iraq. It launched an aggression on Iraq based on the lie of the weapons of mass destruction. And up until this moment, 20 years have passed. 20 years have passed until this moment, and there is not one piece of evidence proving that the brotherly nation of Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction. So here we have America lying without any shame. International shipping, we underscore, we assure the whole world that this is our interest, and we reassure the members of the European Union and the countries of the East and West, and that the international shipping remains secure during the war on Yemen for 9 years, and even during the war of aggression on Gaza. We were clear from day one, and we repeated and we stressed that international shipping is safe, is completely safe, and thousands of ships passed through. Before America came and launched the aggression on Yemen, thousands of ships passed through Bab al-Mandeb safely, and there was no threat whatsoever from Yemen. America is the first and foremost danger. It's the only danger, only threat to international shipping. It militarized the Red Sea, and it came also to launch an aggression against our country, and even their ships were not designated. We did not designate the British ships and the American ships, except after they launched an aggression against our country, and that's our right. It's our right to prevent any hostile nation to pass through our regional waters or our territorial waters in Bab al-Mandeb. And in the end, Bab al-Mandeb is a part of our territorial waters, and international law grants us the right to prevent any country that goes ahead and exceeds an innocent role. And so for this reason, we assure the whole world that America is lies and relies on its lies, and we must raise our voices high. We must raise our voices against America and Britain as the real threats to international peace and security, and peace and security in our region. We stand in support of Palestine, in support of the will of good, the will of freedom and independence and peace and security in the region and in the world. We are witnessing images which we cannot be silent to. Being silent means you're no longer a human, no longer a good person, no longer a Muslim, no longer carry any of the traits which a person could be proud of. We cannot be silent, and this aggression which our country is being subject to actually cannot in any way whatsoever impact our stance, to impact our firm stances regarding Gaza and Palestine. America must lose hope. Whatever it does, whatever it imposes, whatever it strikes or bombs, we cannot in any way whatsoever abandon Gaza. The Yemeni people is ready even to swim through the sea to carry out its declared stances, which is to prevent the Israeli ships from passing through our territorial waters via Bab el-Mandeb, preventing all of these ships, whatever be the nationality, from heading towards Israel. And this is a clear criminality until the aggression on Gaza comes to an end and until the border crossings are open. So
there you go. There you go. I mean, it's pretty blatant at this point. It's pretty blatant. I mean, you cannot dispute anything he said there. The United States is the aggressor. It is not defending itself in any of these situations. And if Israel invades Lebanon, that is going to be an absolutely catastrophic situation. Number one, a lot of people are going to die. But number two, it's going to be an epic defeat for Israel, because Hezbollah has a huge base of support among the population. They are very well organized. They are more set than they were in 2006. I remember the 2006 Israeli invasion of Lebanon. I remember it very well. And it was wild. It was wild. And yeah, I will never forget that. And Israel went into Lebanon. And when they went into Lebanon, at that point, it was 2006, and I had just graduated from high school, and it was a bizarre moment, because it was a sign that the world was shifting out of the domination of the West. So the Soviet Union fell, 1991. And after the fall of the Soviet Union, the United States really had the ability to just destroy countries. And there were three countries that the USA viciously went after the fall of the Soviet Union: Cuba, North Korea, and Iraq. North Korea and Cuba were both communist, Marxist, Leninist governments, still are. Iraq was a Ba'athist Arab socialist government. And all three of those countries had been Soviet aligned. And the United States at that point had total hegemony in the global economy, and they could just viciously destroy countries. The way North Korea was viciously attacked was the fact that North Korea needs oil, right? They have a very efficient food system, but they needed petroleum. They needed gasoline for their tractors. They needed oil. And so the United States, with the petrodollar, prevented North Korea from getting any oil, and their food system came to a grinding halt. It was a disaster in North Korea, called the Arduous March. And there was deaths of malnutrition. It was a disaster. And it's to the credit of North Korea and the government there, the Korean Workers' Party, that they were able to survive that, because any other government would have collapsed under such circumstances. But North Korea has the loyalty of the population, and there was an understanding that they must never surrender to the imperialists. And there were a lot of people who died of malnutrition, and there were a lot of people who went over the border to be guest workers, etc. But North Korea managed to get through that nightmare. They developed nuclear weapons to deter an invasion during that that time. They started developing nuclear weapons. Then the USA made a deal with them, and then they stopped. And then eventually, the USA didn't fulfill its end of the deal, and so then they ended up getting nuclear weapons. During this time, Cuba was subjected to horrendous sanctions from the United States. They called it the special period. And Cuba, they only had electricity for a few hours every day, right? It was that bad. And there were food shortages, and there were big problems in Cuba during these years, because the United States put on all the screws and just weakened Cuba economically. And it was bad. And then there was as Cuba started trying to bring in tourism, there was a campaign from Miami of terrorism, bombing, where they just started bombing all the hotels in Cuba. To try and convince people that if they came to Cuba and they went to a hotel, they might get murdered, right? That was what the Miami Cubans, backed and funded by the American government, that's what they were doing. They were just bombing hotels and killing people. And it was very difficult for Cuba in the 1990s. And Iraq, Iraq's got plenty of oil, so they couldn't prevent them from getting oil like they did with Cuba, like they did with North Korea. Iraq's got plenty of oil, but they prevented Iraq from getting chlorine to clean their water with. They said that chlorine could potentially be a chemical weapon. So on that basis, Iraq was unable to import chlorine in order to have a modern water system. They did insane, vicious things to Iraq. And the result of that was at least 500,000 children under the age of 12 dying. The total deaths as a result of the vicious sanctions that the USA put on Iraq during that time is about 1.2 million people. And these three countries, the USA was able to just target them because they ran the global economy. The Soviet Union was gone. If you wanted to buy oil, you had to buy it from them. And then you'll remember that you had the 9/11 attacks that happened September 11th, 2001. After that, George W. Bush declared that Iraq was the axis of evil, along with North Korea, along with Iran. And you had the USA end up, in 2003, unilaterally invading Iraq without the permission of the UN Security Council. No legal basis ever. Lies about weapons of mass destruction. And, people forget that the U.S. invasion of Iraq being based on lies, it wasn't a little lie, okay? People say, the way that they try to spin it now is they say, oh, well, there was bad intelligence, that the CIA thought they had weapons of mass destruction and they didn't. Bull honking. I'm sorry, anyone who was alive at that time, and I was only a high school student at the time, they really lied. They really, really lied. I mean, they really lied. Colin Powell showed up at the United Nations and he held up a vial, that he said this was a sample of the chemical weapons they had. He had a big map he showed at the United Nations. This is where they knew exactly where the sites of these weapons of mass destruction were. And it was all a big lie. They lied about weapons of mass destruction, and they lied out their asses. And they said that Iraq had tried to purchase tubes, uranium tubes, yellow cake uranium in order to make nukes. And that was a lie. And there was absolutely no basis for any of it, in fact. And they tried to say that Iraq was responsible for 9/11 because one of the hijackers had gone to the hospital in Iraq at one point. He had been to an Iraqi hospital to get medical treatment. Just such obvious lies. And the whole world saw what an ugly, ugly lie the U.S. invasion of Iraq was based on. But it shot the oil prices up. And at the time, Venezuela had an independent, popular leader named Hugo Chavez, and Venezuela's economy was centered around oil. And Russia had just gotten a new president, Vladimir Putin, into office. And when the oil prices shot up, both Putin and Hugo Chavez were able to use the rise in oil prices that came from the destruction of Iraq to restructure their economy. And Venezuela began moving toward Bolivarian socialism, Ba'athist or Bolivarian socialism, And they became friendly to Cuba. They used the oil money to bring in Cuban literacy volunteers, and they used the oil money to bring in, surgeons and doctors, and they wiped out illiteracy in Venezuela, and they provided medical care to poor people in Venezuela. They started building modern housing for the poor people in Venezuela, and they mobilized the Venezuelan people. Russia, Putin restructured the Russian economy, and during Putin's first term in office, the wages of the average Russian worker tripled. Because he just rapidly, with that oil money, started subsidizing all the industries, and Russia's industrial output got to be what it was at the time of the fall of the Soviet Union. And Russia was back in business pretty soon. And Venezuela was having such successes that pretty soon more socialist leaders that were sympathetic to Bolivarian socialism got elected. Evo Morales in Bolivia, Rafael Correa in Ecuador, the Sandinistas in Nicaragua got back into power. And at the time that Israel invaded Lebanon in 2006, that was a moment where all of a sudden it seemed like the 1990s was gone. It seemed like the 1990s was history, because all of a sudden Cuba was getting Venezuelan oil. They weren't starving in Cuba for lack of oil. They had oil, and it came from Venezuela. And Cuba had a friend called Venezuela, and they had a friend called Bolivia, and they had a friend called Nicaragua. All of a sudden, anti-imperialism was setting up shop across the South American continent and Central America as well. I mean, it was a breakthrough. And on top of that, Russia had been just devastated after the fall of the Soviet Union. But with that oil price surge and with a new president, Vladimir Putin, and state control of their oil and natural resources, they were back in business as well. And the Islamic Republic of Iran, right? Again, oil was a very big part. State control of oil is a part of their economy, and the oil tends to go in the government sector. The biggest part of Iran's economy, the biggest economic entity in the country, is the Islamic Revolutionary Guards, which is like an armed group that is backed by Iran's supreme leader. And Iran's economy, they got a big boost from that oil money. And so as a result of the highest oil prices in history at that point, we were at $120 a barrel. Hezbollah in Lebanon was expanding, and Israel decided to invade Lebanon. And Israel invaded Lebanon. And at that point, Hezbollah, which is, they are admirers of the Islamic Revolution of Iran. They follow and they look up to the supreme leader of Iran. They have their own leader, Hassan Nasrallah, but they're 12er Shia Muslims. They were ready to fight. And Hezbollah kicked ass. And Israel got driven out of Lebanon. And it was just a devastating blow to Israel. And Israel was humiliated, and Hezbollah was just loved by the entire Muslim world for what they did. And Hezbollah is aligned with Iran. And Iran, with their new oil revenue and all that, Iran was back in business, right? Iran had a hardline president, right? As a result of the axis of evil speech, Iran realized it was under threat from the imperialists, and it moved in a much more revolutionary direction. In the 1990s, Iran was pivoting into the U.S. camp. They didn't like Saddam Hussein. But after 2003, Saddam Hussein was gone. He wasn't in power anymore. And then on top of that, it became pretty clear that at that point that the United States was coming for them. So they elected a president named Ahmadinejad. And Ahmadinejad was somebody who had ties to the left historically, right? He had been a leftist student. He'd been a Marxist before he became a Muslim, an Islamic revolutionary. And he taught philosophy, and he didn't have a beard. He was the first president that Iran had ever had who wasn't a cleric. He very much empowered the left in Iran, the labor unions and other forces. And Ahmadinejad was in there, and Israel invaded Lebanon, and they just got devastated. They just got wrecked, Israel, I tell the story how they broadcast pornography on the TV as part of their invasion, which is wild, right? But they just got wrecked. And Hezbollah was victorious. And then when they started rebuilding Lebanon, they started putting up murals with Hugo Chavez on them and Che Guevara on them. And what Venezuela was doing was seen as very much part and similar to what Lebanon was doing. And there started to be a relationship between Venezuela and Hugo Chavez and Iran and Hezbollah, right? And there is a very strong relationship right up to this day. Today, it's gotten even deeper, right? There's Iranian supermarkets in Venezuela. There's something in Iran called the House of Latin America, a beautiful facility dedicated to their relationship. And Iran and Venezuela, those two countries, Iran that moved in a very anti-imperialist revolutionary direction in 2006, kind of reviving the anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist goals of the revolution. And Venezuela that elected Hugo Chavez, and then Hugo Chavez survived the 2002 coup and began moving the country towards socialism. Now Maduro is his successor. Bolivarian socialism, Iran moving in a revolutionary direction, Russia back in business. The global economy, the wind of change was shifting, and that defeat that Israel was dealt on the battlefield of Lebanon, that was a moment that the world was very clearly changing, and you could see that. I remember when Evo Morales got elected. That was the same year, 2006. Evo Morales became elected the president of Bolivia. The first country he visited was China. And when he got to China, he gave a speech and he said he admired Mao's proletarian revolution. Evo Morales, the president of Bolivia, his speech that he gave at his inauguration began with a moment of silence in honor of the great Che Guevara. And it was, look, the revolutionary movement was shifting. And 2006 is the year I graduated from high school. And so I was doing full-time revolutionary work for the first time during those years. I remember that, I remember that in those years, Hurricane Katrina had happened the year before. I went to Louisiana, with one of the communist groups I was with, and was doing outreach in Louisiana to try and promote communism in the French Quarter of New Orleans. And I was in the 9th Ward of New Orleans. And I remember I was very excited about what was happening in Latin America and what was happening in the Middle East. I thought that Hezbollah defeating the Israeli invaders was a great thing. I thought that the rise of Hugo Chavez in Venezuela and Evo Morales was a good thing. And I was very frustrated with the communist group that I was with because they didn't support either of those governments. They maintained that Israel and U.S. imperialism were Christian fascism, and they called Hamas and Hezbollah Islamo-fascism, and they maintained these were two outmoded systems. That was what they called it, two outmoded systems, and that they needed to bring forward another way of communism. And I said, that's ridiculous. Right? I said that you always support the anti-imperialists, right? And then they didn't like Hugo Chavez, and they didn't like the Bolivarian movement because it was sympathetic to Iran, and they hated Iran, and they said that only Marxism, Leninism, Maoism, only ultra Maoist stuff counted. And I remember I argued with them about it. And ultimately, I broke with them. They couldn't convince me of their political line, and ultimately, I ended up shifting and joining the Workers' World Party, which I was a member of for 8 years, because they supported Hamas and Hezbollah, and they supported, Hugo Chavez and Evo Morales, and that was a big part of my political development. As I saw that there were forces in the world that were battling the imperialists and doing the right thing and raising people up out of poverty, and I was sympathetic to those forces. And the communist group I was with, they just had this delusional view that they were on neither side. They were for this magical third way of communism. I remember that. And things got more confusing once Barack Obama was in office, and the Arab Spring took us all by surprise. And we didn't exactly, I look back on that and I realized that, that things got a little bit more confusing when Obama was in office. But ultimately, my politics is rooted in the feeling that you should always support the people of the world against the imperialists, right? That you never support the imperialists, that you always support the people of the world in fighting for freedom against the imperialists. That is my understanding. In addition to that, my political development, my political understanding, is rooted in an alliance with the people of the world against the imperialists, but also rooted in an understanding that you can't just stand on the sidelines and announce that you're for communism. That's not a correct way of existing. When the Civil War in America happened between the Southern Confederates who wanted to maintain slavery and the Northern industrial capitalists who wanted to not have slavery, Karl Marx didn't say, well, I'm for the magical third way of communism. I denounce and disavow that Lincoln. He's racist. He's an industrial capitalist. But I also don't support the slave owners, obviously. So I'm for this magical third way. Well, that's not what Karl Marx did. Karl Marx knew that Lincoln wasn't a communist. Karl Marx knew that Lincoln had his flaws. But there were two sides in a war. There was a conflict going on in the United States. And the key question in the conflict, news to Nikki Haley, who didn't know this, the key question in the conflict is, should we have slavery or not? Well, it was pretty obvious to Karl Marx that he was on the anti-slavery side, and that using this division in the ruling class between the pro-slavery wing that was backed by the British Empire and the industrial wing that was backed, that was in an alliance with the labor unions and with the Second Great Awakening religious movement, that utilizing that division in the ruling class could create an opening. And that's how Marxists operate. They don't just stand on the sidelines saying, we have the answer. I denounce and disavow all of you. Come follow us. That's not what they do. Marxists intervene in history when there are two sides in a conflict, right? They strategically intervene in order to advance class forces. They look for an opening. They align with different forces. The understanding, right, the basis of dialectical materialism, that history is driven forward by conflict between two forces. And so when there's a conflict in society, Marxists generally pick one side and they utilize that as an opening. That is the Marxist understanding of history. And Karl Marx wrote for the New York Tribune. This is an important part of my political development and my understanding. And that brings me to something I didn't think I was going to talk about tonight. But, we talked about, at this point, it looks like Israel may invade Lebanon once again. And that is an absolute nightmare situation, but they'll get destroyed. Right. At this point, it looks like the United States is scared to directly fight Iran. Right. Because all of the attacks, the U.S. is carrying out these attacks as reluctantly as they possibly can, because an all-out fight, if Iran were to use all of its might and the Iranian aligned allies throughout the region were to just unload on the United States, that means World War III. And so Biden is trying to kind of look like he's fighting Iran. He doesn't want to actually fight Iran. And Netanyahu wants to provoke the United States to fight Iran, so the United States will have his back because American people don't like what Israel's doing in Gaza. But all of this leads me back to the domestic situation, right? And I'm listening to Donald Trump, and Donald Trump has taken a really awful turn in the last couple of weeks. He now says he's not going to end the war in Ukraine. He's going to give more weapons to Ukraine. Donald Trump has started emphasizing hatred to China and opposition to the U.S. border, playing up the idea that immigrants are our enemies. And I hate what I'm hearing out of Donald Trump. I really do. Right. Donald Trump is not someone I would ever politically endorse. Right. He's an awful guy. But the reason that I think that in a weird way, it's kind of a good thing that Donald Trump is taking this bad turn. It indicates to me that Donald Trump may actually get to win this upcoming election. That's what it indicates to me. Right. If Donald Trump would have no reason to talk this way if he was going to be prevented from taking office. But it looks to me like Donald Trump is talking this way because there's a very good chance he could take office soon. And that surprises me. I assumed the establishment had circled the wagons and said, never again will Donald Trump take office. But it looks to me like Donald Trump is talking now like he wants to be president again, like he could actually be president again. And he's talking badly on foreign policy because he's convinced that there's a chance they'll let him slip through. And that is inspiring to me because this upcoming election, and there's no easy way to say this, and people are going to think it's nuts, okay? And we just have to be the ones to explain it. This upcoming election is going to be a question of, do we want President Kamala Harris or not? That's what's on the ballot. Donald Trump sucked as a president in a lot of ways. He was an awful president. He murdered Qasem Soleimani. The foreign policy establishment didn't trust him, though. That's good. But regardless, he was an awful president. And Joe Biden has been an awful president. I mean, he's been worse than Donald Trump in terms of escalating international conflicts, in terms of many things. Biden is worse than Trump. The country is worse off, and everyone can see that. But Kamala Harris is the most dangerous presidential candidate that has ever existed in history. I was just talking to a friend of mine from India. He was telling me, I don't know if you know this, Kamala Harris's cousin is in India leading State Department-led protests against the government of Modi. Did you know this? Kamala Harris has relatives that are part of this color revolution apparatus and that are in India trying to bring down the Indian government, trying to destabilize India for being too friendly to Russia and China. And Kamala Harris, her presidency would lead to a new Arab Spring. And we're still picking up the pieces from the last Arab Spring. Libya destroyed, Syria, mass deaths, and that Kamala Harris isn't running for president just to represent herself. She's running for president because she's the deranged, psychologically damaged, weak, unintelligent person that has been selected by the Hillary Clinton State Department, by the Silicon Valley fascists, to be the one to lead another Arab Spring. That's what has happened, right? And that they need her in office, just like they needed Barack Hussein Obama to be there when the first Arab Spring happened. They need, Kamala Harris, right, the daughter of Donald Harris and Shmila Gopalan, right? They need a woman who's half Indian and half Jamaican, a dark-skinned woman to be there while they make the world scream for another Arab Spring. And that's what they are planning. The Hillary Clinton State Department did so much damage to the world, and they want to put Kamala Harris in office so that she can do it again, right? And Kamala Harris has no moral compass whatsoever. Kevin Cooper was just hours away from getting the death penalty. They wanted to acquire DNA evidence to find out if he actually committed the crime. And Kamala tried to block it. And they acquired it anyway. And an innocent man didn't get lethal injection. And now she says she feels really bad about it. She tried to kill an innocent man, right? In addition to that, Kamala Harris, when she was running the state attorney general's office, the drug labs that did drug tests to determine people's guilt or innocence were determining false positive results. They were showing that people had done and had drugs in their system that were false. And they didn't tell the judges. They didn't tell anybody. So false positive results were going out everywhere, and they covered this up. And people went to jail. People went to prison because their test results said they used drugs when they didn't use drugs. False positive results. And she no remorse, nothing. She almost killed Kevin Cooper. She put people in jail with false positive results. They asked her on national television. They asked her on the Breakfast Club, national radio, I should say, if she'd ever smoked marijuana. And she said, of course, half my family's from Jamaica. What do you think? And she laughed about it. And now we know, first of all, that that's demented, because she put at least 1,000 people in jail for smoking marijuana. And then she laughs about it, number one. Number two, right? Her Jamaican father heard that and was mortified. And that's what this is about. Kamala Harris wants to kill her father. She hates her father. She makes T-shirts That little girl was me. 10-year-old Kamala Harris on them. Kamala Harris feels that her father abused her, most likely. We don't know the details. She and her father do not speak to each other. Her father did not attend her inauguration as vice president. Her father denounced her presidential campaign. He came out and he said he wanted to disassociate his entire Jamaican family from her campaign. He wrote a 10-page essay, Reflections of a Jamaican Father, denouncing her campaign, which they've taken off the internet. You can find it on the Wayback Machine. Kamala Harris's mother, Shmila, she scapegoated Kamala Harris's father. She blamed all the problems the family had on her deadbeat Jamaican lazy dad, right? She played up the idea that black men are not good fathers, that black men are, and her father was from Jamaica. He was an economics professor, right? He was a respected academic at Stanford University. And she played up the stereotype that he was a pot-smoking, lazy man from the islands. And it devastated Donald Harris to have his daughters think that he was that. And the mother scapegoated and incited Kamala Harris to hate Donald Harris, to think that he abused her when she was a child. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. And Kamala Harris entered adulthood with a vicious hatred for black men. And if you read the biographies that are out there, if you read my book, and I'm probably going to have another book on her very soon. If you read my book on Kamala Harris, it's scary. And the level of hatred that she has for black men in particular it's bizarre, especially when you keep in mind that the way she rose up the ranks of politics is she was Willie Brown's mistress. Willie Brown, prominent politician in the San Francisco Bay Area, she was his mistress. And, he's a black man. And she hated him, but yet she fucked him in order to move up the ranks of San Francisco politics, right? I'm going to have to figure out how to touch this in the new book, but it's more evidence is out there. I mean, she fucked her way to the top, and she fucked a black man to get to the top, right? She fucked Willie Brown. She was Willie Brown's mistress. And everybody knew it. And she became kind of a celebrity in local San Francisco politics by being Willie Brown's mistress. And then Willie Brown took care of her and helped her move up the ranks of the district attorney's office, becoming district attorney, etc. And yet at the same time, she has this vicious hatred for black men, right? But yet, and I mean, it's like when you think about what was going on there, right? That she was having an affair with Willie Brown for years, yet she hates black men, and she wanted to destroy and kill black men, right? I mean, if you think about what's going on psychologically, how does one do this, right? How does one do this, right? This is some very, very dangerous psychology, right? I didn't touch on Willie Brown in the last book, Jonathan. I didn't touch on it because, I didn't think it was good to go there. But at this point, we have to talk on it. Serious daddy issues is right? At this point, I mean, the truth about Kamala Harris is coming out. And the fact that she threw thousands of black men in jail, right? The fact that she almost executed an innocent black man named Kevin Cooper, an innocent man. She almost, lethal injected him, right? I mean, she is a dangerous human being. And she has this image of 10-year-old Kamala Harris. And that image is, I mean, she, that little girl was me. She's thinking about her childhood trauma. She's thinking about how she is a victim and how her mother reinforced in her mind year after year, you are a victim. Your father's a bum. Your father's a piece of crap. Your father's a bum, lazy, pot-smoking Jamaican piece of crap. He mistreated you up. And her mother just demonized, her father to her. That she's entered adulthood with this pathological hatred for black men, with this pathological hatred for her father. You're dealing with somebody who is dangerously crazy. Okay. you don't know how dangerously crazy Kamala Harris is. But if you look at the Arab Spring, though, if you look at the Arab Spring, this is the kind of crazy they've been shopping for. Okay, because Samantha Power has the exact same story. Her father was an alcoholic, beat up her mother, and she came to the United States to get away. Her mother took her to the United States to get away from her alcoholic father, right? If you look at Amy Klobuchar, same story. Alcoholic father beat up her mother. She grew up hating her father, loving her mother. It's the same shit. And they find these women who enter adulthood with a vendetta against their fathers, right? This rage against their fathers that's part of their feminist empowerment, the belief that their fathers are awful human beings, which, I mean, I've never met Donald Harris. I think Donald Harris, to be honest, really got, he got mistreated. I mean, he's a respected academic. And the fact that that he was made out to be, what he was, and the fact that he didn't get to live with his daughters is absolutely horrendous. But, Samantha Power's father, Amy Klobuchar's father, those men, it's a different story. And I don't honestly know what happened to little Kamala Harris when she was a child. And I honestly don't know what happened to, what happened, whether he, he beat Shamala or what. I don't know if there was domestic violence. I don't know what happened. Okay. But we're at the point that, that Kamala Harris is very close to being president. And most people can sense that there's something wrong with Kamala Harris. Okay. People don't like her. She will never win an election. She has no chance of ever being elected president of the United States, ever. The only way she can become president is if she gets back into office. She gets back into office and, if, as vice president, and Biden steps down. And Biden's already fading, right? We know Biden's not all there already. They want to sneak Kamala Harris into office so she can launch another Arab Spring, right? And that's what they want. And I mean, the amount of stuff that's out there now about Kamala Harris, it has gotten worse, okay? I mean, you have no idea, right? You have no idea, some of the stuff that's out there now. And Kamala Harris will launch World War III. Kamala Harris, she will launch another Arab Spring. She is intimately tied in with the color revolution apparatus. Kamala Harris is the main danger. The White House, it's been leaked by James O'Keefe that at this point it is, public record. It is out there now, thanks to James O'Keefe. She's going to be on the ticket. They are not going to drop her from the ticket, right? The White House staff have been caught saying, yeah, she's going to be on the ticket, unfortunately, even though she's incompetent, even though her staff can't stay working for her. They hate her guts, right? She can't keep staff workers, working for her, right? That they just can't stand the toxic environment in her office. She's a narcissist like you wouldn't believe. She is viciously cruel with her tongue. She just tears people down. She's a very, very vicious person. And they want her in office, right? And she is the main danger, right? And this upcoming election is the last chance that they'll have to get Kamala in. And we have to go all in to prevent that from happening, right? We're not telling people how to vote. We're telling them the truth about Kamala Harris. We don't endorse any candidate at CPI. We don't campaign for anybody. But we must tell the world the truth about Kamala Harris and who she truly is. Because this situation in the Middle East is already a tinderbox. It's already in danger of boiling over into World War III. And right now, you know what I mean? I mean, Kamala Harris is like the worst person to have there. Now, Donald Trump is awful, but Donald Trump's a deal maker. Donald Trump's a negotiator, right? And as bad as Donald Trump is, and as bad as what he did as president, ripping up the Iran nuclear deal, at least Donald Trump is selfish enough. He doesn't want to go down in history as the guy who started World War III. Donald Trump is selfish enough that he would want to be remembered well by the history books. Donald Trump is enough of a selfish bastard that he would be better for the country than Kamala Harris, who is a deranged lunatic, who they know how to trigger and they know how to push their buttons. Kamala Harris is very, very dangerous. And we need to figure out how we can make sure that a Kamala Harris presidency never happens. And I'm telling you about, the potential now of Israel invading Lebanon. I'm telling you about everything that's happening. We need to make sure that Kamala Harris does not become president of the United States, right? It is urgent. And I'm figuring out what we're going to do. I mean, there's just so many different angles we can come at it through. We must stop Kamala Harris at all costs. She is the main danger in 2024. She is the greatest of all evils, right? Biden's bad, but he's nowhere near as bad as Kamala would be. Trump is bad. I'm not telling you to vote for Trump, right? Don't misquote me, but Trump would be better than Kamala. We must do everything we can to let the world know the truth about Kamala Harris. Why is it that there is only now 2 books exposing Kamala Harris? One written by me in 2020, right before the 2020 elections, and now this new book, Amateur Hour, that focuses on her Willie Brown affair. Why are there only 2 books about Kamala Harris, right? When Barack Obama was running for president, we learned everything there was to know about Barack Obama. Barack Obama's pastor, Barack Obama's Muslim school in Indonesia, Barack Obama's stepfather, Barack Obama this, Barack Obama that. We learned everything there was to know about Barack Obama. No one knows anything about Kamala Harris. Nothing. No one knows anything about her. Oh, isn't she like half Indian and half Jamaican, and she used to be in California, and no one knows anything about her except that she gives everyone the creeps. Everyone hears her talk, and they're just like, ugh, that's a scary lady who might hurt me. That's basically how she comes across. If you've ever met somebody, you've been at a party, and there's a woman there who's just waiting for you to say the wrong things, so they can rip your head off. That's Kamala Harris, right? Everyone who comes in contact with her this is a scary lady. This is a scary lady who I want to stay away from. That's the vibe that she gives off, right? And she could very well become the president of the United States, even though the American people would never vote for her, okay? And we have to raise the alarm about Kamala Harris because, in a touchy international situation like this, the psychological makeup of an individual could actually change the course of history. And so we have to figure out how we're going to intervene. And I'm working on figuring that out. But we got to stop Kamala Harris at all costs. I guess that's what I want to say. But anyway, folks, I appreciate all of you. I appreciate our community here. If you want to support the work that we do, support my ability to maintain this studio, this extra room here in my apartment, that rent is too damn high in New York City. If you want to help support me and make sure that we can maintain things, I encourage you to send super chats to help support our channel here. Not just ask questions, but support our channel. But folks, names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Super chats. Oh, we got a Rumble rant from Pranjabat. All right. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who's with us? Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? All right. Bendigo, Australia. David Fox. Anthony in Texas. Dino in Australia. Klaus Kinski in Germany. Bob Troy, New York. Carolyn and Dario from Brooklyn. Oh, wow. It's just moving so fast here. Carolyn and Dario from Brooklyn, Utica, New York. Mark Jones, Patch in Arizona. Mia from Iceland. Sam in Springfield, Massachusetts. San Quentin Prison, California. We got John McCarthy in Chicago. We got Bill Seattle. We got Dan Keating in Little Falls, New Jersey. Nick S. in Michigan. Mariah in North Carolina. Detroit Anthony. Welcome. Chris and April in Salt Lake City. Very, very, very good. Very, very good. Auckland, New Zealand. Kiwi Corner. Gabby in Chicago. Ryan in Kansas City. Colin in Greensboro. Sherry in Cape May. Very, very, very good. Meredith and Quinn in Washington State. Panos in Athens. St. David's, Bermuda. Welcome. Dan from Pasadena. Very, 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 very good. Very, very, very good. Soggy Moonlight Beach, California. Zach Brunch from Richmond, Virginia. A Better American. John McCarthy in Chicago. Mosen from Denver. Rice from Adelaide, Australia. I'll definitely talk about that. Good question. Toey in Sweden. Welcome, Toey. Welcome, Toey. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Names and locations, folks. Names and locations. Anybody else? Anybody else? Names and locations. Names and locations. Names and locations. All righty. All right. Andrew Walter in Argentina. Nick in Daphne, Alabama. Kanjara in Scotland. Jane in Hammond, Indiana. Very good. Jane Dombrowski. Chairman Meow in Phoenix, Arizona. All right. Support the content that supports you. Well, thank you, Funky. Thank you very much. And in Washington State, USA. Welcome, welcome, welcome. All right. All right, folks. So now I'm going to start answering people's questions. I guess I'll do the Rumble rant first. Thoughts on the European Farmers' Rebellion. Look, the degrowth policies are insane. The White House, the World Business Forum, BlackRock want to reduce global crop outputs. They want to produce less food at this time. That's bullshit. And anybody who can't get through their minds why that's a bad thing, I'm very frustrated with you. I don't care if they're racist. I don't care if they're right-wing, if they're all Trump supporters. Look, we need more food in the world, not less. All right? And the policies being pushed by BlackRock, being pushed by the World Economic Forum, being pushed by Joe Biden in the White House that wants to reduce the world's food supply are wrong. It's not much more complicated than that. Russia has rebuilt their entire farming apparatus. They're sending grain to African countries. They're feeding people. China is working with African countries to develop their agriculture, right? Gaddafi, before the overthrow of socialism in Libya, Gaddafi was greening the desert with the world's great man-made river, the world's largest irrigation project. More food, more crops, good. Less crops, less food, bad. Not that complicated. And I know that they're conservative, and I know that they're not the proletariat, and I know that they say a lot of right-wing things, but the issue is, do we have more food or less? That's the issue, okay? And that at this point, the giant agribusiness corporations want to reduce the world food supply. Meanwhile, the lower levels of capital, the independent farmers, many of which are millionaires, they're not, poor men. They own huge tracts of land. They don't want to be crushed, right? And that the state is trying to use climate change rhetoric, organic farming, etc., to crush the small farmers, to secure a monopoly for global agribusiness, to reduce the world's food supply, because they think that's what is good around climate change. This is Malthusianism. This is degrowth. And we're against that. And we're for the farmers. The farmers who want to grow more food, hey, you're my guy. I'm with you, right? The big ultra corporations and banks that want to reduce the global food supply, I'm against you. Not that complicated, and I mean, this is very much, this is why I respect Lyndon LaRouche, is that Lyndon LaRouche realized that the main way the ultra monopolies and the imperialists were going to try and secure their grip on power was with degrowth. The degrowth is the basis of fascist economics. That's that understanding that Malthusianism, that, you get that from R. Palm Dutt and his great book, Fascism and Social Revolution, but really understanding that the Eastern establishment, the ultra monopolies in the United States, are trying to stop the wheels of history with degrowth policies. That is, in our era, the defining effort of the imperialists to solve the problems of the capitalist system. They are trying to reduce the world's food supply, reduce the human population, all the scary stuff about the World Economic Forum that the right wing is talking about. That's what they're talking about. And in my new book, it's been around for a while, Where is America Going? Marxism, MAGA, and the Coming Revolution. I talk about this, right? Capitalism has a built-in problem of overproduction and the tendency of the falling rate of profits, right? Under capitalism, poverty is created by abundance, right? People are homeless because there's too many houses. People are hungry because there's too much food. And so how do you solve it? We say that it's solved by the workers and society as a whole controlling the means of production and overcoming the irrationality of the market. However, the ruling class, the ultra monopolies, the rich, they obviously don't want that. So what is their solution? Degrowth. Drive down living standards, reduce consumption, reduce the population. And that is the basis of fascist economics. And we must oppose fascism. And the idea that we want less production of food when people are starving in the world, that is something we must oppose. And I mean, it's that simple. And I don't care if the farmers are racist. I don't care if they said this or that. The issue is, do we have more food or not? I think we have it. They're the lower levels of capital. Those guys are right wingers. Historically, the lower levels of capital are more libertarian in their economic outlook. They're more opposed to labor unions, et cetera, because they're the lower levels of capital. Whereas it is the upper levels of capital, the ultra monopolies, who favor more state control because they get to write the rules. That division in the ruling class between the ultra monopolies and the lower levels of capital, the Yankee and Cowboy War. Carol Quigley wrote about it. Carl Oglesby wrote about it. This divide. At this point, it's flipped, right? And, communists need to stop acting like the foot soldiers of the ultra rich and in their effort to control the lower levels of capital. And we need to align with the lower levels of capital and with the countries around the world rising up from poverty, the BRICS countries, against the ultra monopolies, right? And that is the thesis of my book. The Yankee and Cowboy War has been reversed. The lower levels of capital, as well as the anti-imperialist bloc of countries, have a common enemy and a common future. They believe in growth, and that is the basis for building an anti-monopoly coalition, a united front against imperialism here in the United States. So I support the farmers. All right. Okay, next question. Dutch Afrikaans of South Africa say, we realize Judaism is true. We moved our ancestral homeland, settling in the occupied West Bank. Well, I'm telling you that I worked at an insurance company that was a lot of right-wing Zionists. And that was the first time in my life I ever heard anyone defend apartheid in South Africa. But one of the major arguments that I heard from my coworkers at this insurance company, they were conservative. There were many Hasidic and Orthodox Jews who were big supporters of Israel. And there are some, like a very small minority of Orthodox Jews that oppose Israel, but these ones certainly were not those. And their argument was, they would argue frequently that South Africa has gotten worse since apartheid was overthrown, and that's why Israel must stay intact. And that was one of their big arguments. Oh, look, South Africa's poor. Oh, look, South Africa has a lot of crime. Oh, look, white farmers get killed. There's farm raids. So therefore, apartheid is good. I was shocked, but right-wing Zionists tend to defend apartheid in South Africa. That happens. So I'm not shocked by that. The Netanyahu crowd, they think the overthrow of apartheid was a bad thing, etc. All right. Colin Powell fought hard inside the Bush administration to try and stop that war, but then publicly repeated any lie they told him to. I've heard people claim that, right? I mean, I have heard that. Okay. And that's certainly in, the film that was made about George W. Bush by Oliver Stone. They presented that, and many people have presented the image that Colin Powell tried to stop that war inside the administration. And I believe there's probably some truth in that. I want to hear more about that. I don't know enough about that to say. I do know that that's the perception many people have, that Colin Powell, he thought it was a bad idea, but he was a team player. He was part of the Bush administration. He was Secretary of State. And so he went along with it. But yeah, I've heard that, I guess. I don't know the details of that in particular, but I believe you. And that is something that many people I respect have pointed out. All right. Could you get into the specifics of why Harris is so terrible? Well, I went into quite a bit of detail after you sent that super chat, but, somebody else asked about, I guess we'll just get into that now. Someone else asked about, the way she jailed parents because their kids were truant from school. There's a clip of Kamala Harris bragging about jailing parents because their kids were truant from school. I am not exaggerating. You know, I mean, that is some real next level evil. You know, here, why don't I show the clip, right? This is from Peter Coffin's great documentary, Money and American Injustice. This is about Kamala Harris. You know, let me see if I can find that clip. Do I have it? No, I don't. So I'm going to download. I'm just going to show that clip because I showed the footage of Kamala Harris. I mean, you know, and I talked about it in my speech I gave at the event. Peter Coffin does a great job in the clip, but yeah, I mean, it's particularly demented. You know, it's particularly demented. So yeah, I'll show that clip a little bit later on, but you know, I mean, you know, kids need to be in school. If they're not in school, it's a problem. But if you throw their parents in jail, does that help children of low-income families? Oh, their parent goes to jail. That solves everything, right? And what happens to those kids while they're in jail, while their parents are in jail, right? They go into foster care. You know, they have to then, when they get out of jail, they have to prove, you know, in a court procedure that they're fit to be parents again. I mean, it's oh man, I mean, it's absolutely crazy. The idea that she was helping children by jailing parents for truancy. And the fact that she brags about it, she's not thinking about those kids. She's thinking about vengeance. And she's thinking about little Kamala. The world was so unfair to little Kamala Harris. And she wants revenge. She thinks of her father as a deadbeat. She thinks of her father as a bad parent, right? And she's getting revenge on people that are like her father, those irresponsible parents, you know, I mean, that's, you know, I mean, she has a stereotype in her head. That's, you know, part of the Bill Clinton thing about, oh, black men aren't good fathers and all of that. She's got that in her head, right? And with that narrative in her head, she's taking revenge on Donald Harris. I mean, it's very, very evil. I'm going to show you the clip. Here we go. And you can watch the whole movie. It's on the CPI website. If you go to films, you can watch Money and American Injustice. We have a whole film about this issue, the truth about Kamala Harris.
Black Lives Matter, when in reality, Kamala Harris was the queen of mass incarceration. Kevin Cooper was hours away from receiving lethal injection. Hours away from it. His lawyers asked that DNA evidence be acquired in order to make sure he was actually guilty of the crime. And Kamala Harris's office tried to prevent DNA evidence from being acquired. They wanted Kevin Cooper to be executed, but the governor of California disagreed. They acquired DNA evidence, and the execution was stopped. The New York Times tells us that she feels really bad about it, for whatever that means. And people can also recall that while she was head of the California State Attorney General's office, over 1,000 people were locked up for smoking marijuana. She presided over jailing a lot of people. And on top of that, the drug labs in the state of California that were being used by the police were turning up false positive results. And yet, Kamala Harris's office did not tell the defense attorneys or the judges about this. They knew that the drug labs were turning over false positives, and people went to prison because her office concealed that their drug labs were turning up false positives. And another thing about Kamala Harris, I don't know if people saw, but there's a video of Kamala Harris where she's bragging about how she jailed the parents of children who were truant from school.
I would not be standing here were it not for the education I received. And I know many of us will say the same thing. And I believe a child going without an education is tantamount to a crime. So I decided I was going to start prosecuting parents for truancy. Well, this was a little controversial in San Francisco. And frankly, my staff went bananas. They were very concerned because we didn't know at the time whether I was going to have an opponent in my re-election race. But I said, look, I'm done. This is a serious issue, and I've got a little political capital, and I'm going to spend some of it.
Have you seen the clip?
Yeah, a little political capital. That's what she wants to do, right? a little political capital. You can get away with something. That's what she wants to do. Throw a bunch of low-income parents in jail. That's her idea of spending a little political capital. If that's not an evil person, I don't know what is.
Gets up there and it's the same kind of thing. She's giggling. Yes, I had the idea that we could lock up parents who are truant from school. You know, I wouldn't be anywhere in my life if it weren't for my education. And so not giving a child their education is a crime. And so I jailed parents, and she's giggling about it. It's just so great. And, you know, I see so much in U.S. media. They like to trivialize incarceration. There's so many shows on Netflix and all of that where it ends towards the end where someone goes to jail, but it's part of the happy ending. It's okay. And they don't seem to realize what that means. You know, when one member of a family, when a father or a mother goes to prison, or a brother or a sister, it hurts the entire family. And when Kamala Harris is up there giggling about, oh, you know, I locked up these parents because their kids weren't in school. You know, yeah, kids need to be in school. When kids aren't getting to school, it's a problem. But the worst thing you could do is then throw their parents in jail. That's not going to help the situation in any conceivable way. But when she's joking about it, and she's laughing about it, Kamala Harris, she says, what did she say? She said, well, I wouldn't be anywhere if it wasn't for my education. It's about her. The big line when she was calling out Joe Biden, when she was trying to contend with Joe Biden in the presidential election, what did she shout at Joe Biden? She shouted, that little girl was me!
You know, there was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me.
And then her campaign started churning out T-shirts with the face of 10-year-old Kamala Harris on them. Do you remember this? Yes. It's almost like she wants us to vote for her because she was once a 10-year-old child. I mean, that's what it sounds like. What's particularly interesting is, you know, you remember when Barack Obama was running for president. We knew everything about Barack Obama. We knew all about Barack Obama's pastor. We knew about Barack Obama's father from Kenya. We knew the school he went to in Indonesia. But Kamala Harris, barely anybody knows anything about Kamala Harris. Well, Kamala Harris's mother, who's now deceased, was from India, was a cancer researcher. And Kamala Harris's father, Donald Harris, was a Marxist economist and is a Marxist economist, a professor at Stanford University. He was an advisor to the government of Michael Manley in Jamaica. And he and Kamala are estranged from one another. He did not attend Kamala's inauguration as vice president. They're not on good speaking terms. But the more you look at it, it's very clear that Kamala Harris sees herself as a victim. The way Kamala Harris speaks, the world has been unfair to her. And she blames Donald Harris for that to some degree or other. We don't know why. We also, there's rumors, we don't really know what happened when she was in Quebec. We just know she never talks about the years that she spent in Quebec. But Kamala Harris thinks that she is a victim. And she wants the whole world to know that that little girl was her. And she wants vengeance. And she wants to make people pay. And she wanted to make Kevin Cooper pay. And she wanted to make those parents pay. That's what leftism is if it's stripped of economics. If it's stripped of class struggle, if it's stripped of a desire to have the people rise up and control the means of production, if it's just anger, if it's just revenge, it's just a call for destruction, a call for rebellion, that's what Kamala Harris is. Kamala Harris, she's very much a guillotine meme. That's what she is. It's the glorification of punishment, a desire for revenge, a desire for destruction. And that if you look at the history of socialism around the world, the strength of socialism wasn't the guillotines, it wasn't the firing squads, it wasn't the persecution. That's not what people remember the strength of socialism being. They just did a poll. 75% of Russians say that the Soviet Union was the best time in their history, but they're not thinking that because of executions. This was from a PBS documentary. They interviewed a woman named Tatiana Fedorova.
Stalin set a task. Build this or build that. And thanks to the fact that people trusted him and this enthusiasm of young people, it was possible. Remember, this was a country where people were illiterate, lived in virtual darkness, wore birch bark shoes. Even now, I think it's like something out of a fairy tale. How was it possible at one of the most difficult times to raise these great construction sites? It was only possible through the unity of the people and the love of the people for their idol.
And the reason Stalin remains wildly popular in Russia, It's not because he executed people. It's because he mobilized them to build that country up from nothing. This was a country... He built some of the world's largest power plants. He wiped out illiteracy, and he built a modern industrial country. He raised millions of people up out of poverty. And then they fought off the Nazi invaders, and then they rebuilt the country again. And a few years later, they were the first country in outer space. And the strength of socialism was not that it punished people and that it persecuted people, but rather that it enabled people to go out and build and construct. I've said to many people, I'm not a socialist because I want to destroy America. I'm a socialist because I want to save America. And we have to save America from the horrors that are being unfolded by an irrational system where profits come before people. I want to save America. I want to build a better world. If all the apparatus they've created for destroying people, for imprisoning people, for breaking people psychologically, could be utilized to build and to construct. If popular power were put in control of the means of production and control of the state apparatus of the United States, we could build something very, very beautiful.
They want you to be mad at Russia and China instead of the looters that are sitting not very far from here off Wall Street, who are actively getting bailouts in the billions, arguably even in the trillions, for their gambling debts. That's what we're here against, and that's why we're taking a stand for freedom of speech, because they're going after the Youre movement and anyone who stands against the imperialists, because they know a real threat that's rising. They know we authentically represent the American people. They know that the American people are ready for a change and ready for an end to the wars. And that's why they're cracking down on our First Amendment. They're cracking down on our Fourth Amendment. They're cracking down on all the civil liberties we know and love.
Yep. There you go. You can watch the full film at cpiusa.org/films. It's a great film that Peter Coffin made. It's just an absolutely great film. I thought it was a great film that he made. I saw that Jonathan R. Blazer had another Rumble rant. He said, are there any Netflix documentaries worth watching on Netflix or Prime, etc.? It seems like they are all tend toward degrowth, anti-cult, at best a limited hangout. If they are, it's cultural Cold War. There was a film, I don't even know if it's still on Netflix, that I really liked, that I would recommend. I don't know if it's still on there. It's called Crossing the Line. And it's about Joseph Dresnok, who was the American soldier who defected to North Korea in the early 60s. It was made in 2006, and I think it's still on Netflix, Crossing the Line. I really like Crossing the Line, about the life of this American guy from Indiana who basically tried to commit suicide by crossing the DMZ, and he spent the rest of his life in North Korea. It's a very good film, and it was on Netflix a long time ago. I don't know if it's still on there anymore, but I think it probably is. I don't think they take films off. So that would be worth watching, Jonathan, if you get a chance. But my wife watches Netflix. I don't watch Netflix because I just, and I am in a Netflix documentary, and I'm mad about that. I mean, I'm not mad about it, I guess. I'm impressed that I'm in the Netflix documentary. I refuse to watch it. I've only had about 1 million people text me the screenshot of it and say, oh my God, I just saw you. But they have this series on Netflix, and this shows you how sophisticated they are. They have this series on Netflix called How to Become a Dictator. I am not making this up. It's called How to Become a Dictator. And in one of the episodes, they show me twice when they're trying to show an evil, angry mob. And they show a clip of me when I was at the White House arguing with anti-Assad protesters who were calling for the bombing of Syria, right? And they are, celebrating the forces that became ISIS, that are beheading Christians and all of that. And I very angrily shouted at this woman, I shouted, "You are a terrorist murderer." And so they have taken this clip of me it's the day after I was on CNN. I was on CNN in 2013. And then the next day, it's in September 2013, I was at the White House at a protest. And these right-wing, these I shouldn't say right-wing, these pro-war people were there harassing the anti-war rally. And so I shouted at this crowd of bomb Syria people that wanted to murder their own people. I shouted, "You are a terrorist murderer." And they took that image of me, and twice, not once, but twice, they say, and then you create an evil mob, and they show me saying, "You are a terrorist murderer." And I look at that and I'm like, well, first of all, give me some money, right? I mean, I deserve some money for this, right? I mean, you're using my image and all of that, right? I mean, where's my check? Number one. Number two, like, that's subtle, right? And the fact that I've become a target of bread tube and their hit pieces, like I'm on their radar screen, right? And that's a way of subtly implanting into the people that I'm bad. And if you watch that documentary, right? If you watch that documentary, which I refuse to watch, it's all about how evil North Korea is, how evil Gaddafi was. It's trying to, implant in people's heads that I'm an evil person, right? And that I'm aligned with North Korea. Well, I am aligned with North Korea. I think the people of North Korea and the peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula is a good thing. I think the sanctions on North Korea need to be lifted. I am aligned with Russia. I think they're doing the right thing in the Donbass, but they're trying to implant in people's minds that not only are these countries bad, and they repeat all kinds of lies about these countries, but also people in America like Caleb that protest, they're also bad. Right? That's like some sophisticated psychological warfare. They made me a character in their political pornography film. And so, I just, in a way, I take it as a compliment. And, I got to tell you, right? It's the most annoying thing. I get an endless amount of people telling me I'm not important. I get this, right? And it's beyond me. If I'm not important, then leave me the fuck alone. I'm not important. Why do you need to make documentary films on YouTube that are got hundreds of thousands of views telling absolute lies and misrepresentations about me to convince people not to like me? If I'm not important, why has the FBI knocked on my door to try and scare me and frighten my wife before? Why did the company I work for have to register with the U.S. Department of Justice as a foreign agent? I'm sorry. I think I'm pretty damn important, right? But it's like, on the one hand, right, I'm Satan. I'm the most evil person. And then when I point out how the ridiculous lengths they're going to demonize me, digging into my personal life, sending infiltrators and informers into my organization, paying people to talk about my personal life, doing all kinds of ridiculous evil things. Whenever I bring that up and say, look, this is pretty awful what they're doing to me, then it's, oh, you think you're so important, don't you? You think you're the center of the universe, don't you? I don't think I'm the center of the universe, but it's pretty clear that the government of the United States and the people that are defenders of the foreign policy status quo in the United States have fingered me as somebody who's on their shit list, And I mean, I don't have to convince you of this. But the obnoxious response that I get, right? It's like, at the same time, they're telling you that I'm Satan incarnate. I'm the most dangerous American to have ever existed. I'm a maniacal white supremacist Nazbol cult leader, all these awful things, right? But then 2 minutes later, and he's not important, and he's not important, and he's not important. If I'm not important, why are they so desperate to convince you I'm evil? Why have they spent literally millions of dollars to make me not important? They could have just given the money to me, right? I mean, seriously. I'm joking, but they have. I have never made $1 million in my life. You know what I mean? But they have spent millions of dollars, right? They have spent millions of dollars to convince people that I'm bad. Okay, it is. Look for yourself. It's all there. Like, they have gone to ridiculous lengths to demonize me. So, but I'm not important. Right? They put my face in a Netflix film to demonize me, but I'm not important, right? And that's one of the things that the people that the wreckers, you can call them, that's one of the things they always say, right? Because look, there's no way you can be in my position and not disappoint and piss people off, right? I'm going to make decisions, right? I am going to make decisions, right, that people aren't going to like. And there's going to be times that, I'm going to, look, I can't keep everyone happy at all times. And if I'm in the position that I'm in, I'm going to piss people off. And so they find the people that are pissed off and they tell them to turn against me and become my enemy. and they say, oh, well, won't that hurt anti-imperialism? They say, oh no, Caleb's not important. Oh no, CPI is not important. They said those exact words to tons of people on the phone, right? Oh, it's not important. Oh, Caleb's not important. CPI is not important. Let's just get mad about this. Let's, I mean, I'm telling you, the way I have been targeted, and they always just say, oh, just focus on your own grievances. Caleb's not important in the big scheme of things. Apparently I am. I mean, if I wasn't, they wouldn't spend so much time trying to destroy me. And the fact that I'm still here, that is proof to you, right? Because there's a lot of flashes in the pan. You ever hear that expression, a flash in the pan? You ever hear that, right? When you're cooking, when you're cooking something every so often, there's a flash in the pan, but then the fire goes out really quickly. There's a lot of flashes in the pan these days. A lot of people that come out and they're like, oh, I'm an anti-imperialist, I'm a revolutionary. And then they get the fuck out of there. I ain't one of those. Hey, folks, I've been doing this for a long time, right? I was on CNN in 2013. That was over 10 years ago. I was on CNN defending Syria. I was part of Occupy Wall Street in 2011. I've been doing this stuff a long time, and I'm not going to stop. I have no interest in doing anything else as long as I live. I am a revolutionary. And you know that I'm not a flash in the pan, because if I was a flash in the pan, I would have stopped maybe 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 15 years ago. I am not a flash in the pan. I am here. I am in this for real. And I have endured enough at this point that you can be sure that you can rely on me, and that joining my organization is not going to be a waste of your time. Right. And I appreciate, Mia, I appreciate you joining the Patreon. It is appreciated. Joining my organization is not going to be a waste of your time, because we're not going to go away. Right. We survived a very an attempted hostile takeover back in August. Back, not this August, but the August before that. We have survived so much. We're just not going away. We're in this for real. We're in it for the long haul, and we're going to win. And we're on the winning side. We are on the winning side in the world, right? And that's what it all really gets down to. At the end of the day, the BRICS is the future, and the Western financial order is dying, and that's why they're trying to implement degrowth. But anyway, many other super chats. Would you consider Hezbollah territory is socialist? Chairman Meow, I mean, this is where it gets tricky, okay? Because Iran, for example, Iran makes clear they do not consider their economy to be socialist, right? They consider it to be neither capitalist or socialist. They call it not capitalism, but Islam. And they say we're not socialist because we're not like the Soviet Union. We're not socialist because we don't believe in secular Marxism. We're motivated by our Islamist ideology. But I look at Iran, and Iran's got state-controlled industries. Iran, that's their economy is centered around state-controlled industries. They got 5-year plans. They've got, Basij councils in local areas that enforce the will of the revolution, that are a lot like Soviets or Bolivarian circles or citizens' power councils or worker and peasant associations. They've got state central planning. They're against capitalism. They're friends with all the communist countries. So it's like, is Iran socialist? If Iran was socialist, how would it be different? If Iran was an actual socialist country, maybe they would have a different ideology, but ideology doesn't determine reality, right? Right. When Britain had its capitalist revolution under Oliver Cromwell, it was ultra religious. When France had its capitalist revolution, it was anti-religious and atheistic, but both of them changed property relations. Iran is an anti-imperialist country that is tied in with a number of communist and socialist countries, that is anti-imperialist, that has an Islamist ideology, that has a state centrally planned economy. Out of respect for Iran, I'm not going to go around and call them socialist if they don't want to be called that. And the same goes for Hezbollah. I'm not going to call Hezbollah communist or socialist if they don't want to be called that, right? And you have to respect them, right? If they feel like you calling them socialist or communist makes them out to be atheists or insults their religious tradition, well, then we shouldn't do that. But if their allies are all the communist governments, if their enemies are the U.S. imperialists, if they preside over state-run economies, what are they? We do have to admit that the Cold War is over. Classic Marxism-Leninism is not coming back. right? Classic Soviet style economy is not coming back. But the Soviet Union and the Bolshevik Revolution opened the door to everything that's happening now, right? You would not have had an Islamic Revolution of Iran if it weren't for communism. And, and if you read the Ayatollah, Khomeini and his writings, he's heavily influenced by Marxism. And Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, he got his degree in Russia, in the Soviet Union. And he was a communist before he converted to being a Shia Muslim Islamist. He was a communist. So communism is a big influence on him, even though he doesn't have that perspective anymore, even though he's religious. So, I'm kind of urging people, this is why we talk about the city building tendency. This is why our book is called We Are City Builders and all of this, right? We're anti-imperialists, we're the city building tendency. Look, but we study Marxism, Leninism, because ML is the foundation. And that's where my friend Jyoti Brar is 100% right. You don't have anti-imperialism without ML. You just don't, right? Without Lenin and his theory of imperialism, without Bolshevism, without the Congress of the Peoples of the East, without Stalin and his 5-year plans, you don't have any of this. So communism is a big part of what exists in the world today, but it's different. So I am actually trying to get the conversation away from, is this country socialist? Is it not? Right? I mean, that's just, I want the conversation to change away from that. The answer at the end of the day is Hezbollah territories are definitely not socialist in the way that the Soviet Union was. But are they socialist in the way China is? It looks that way to me. But, I wouldn't call them that because they don't want to be called that. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The issue in the world today is imperialism. Are you for the Western imperialists? Are you for the people resisting? That's what matters. Right. And there you go. All right. It's more than just that, but yeah, you're right, Mia. I mean, she is definitely a piece of work. I'll give you that. Is there a chance that the delegates vote off Kamala Harris off the ticket? I mean, it's possible, right? But the reason, according to this tape leaked by James O'Keefe, the reason that they won't remove her is because the polling would hurt them. If they removed the first black woman vice president from their ticket, that would hurt them. But the thing is, that would only hurt them if Kamala said that, right? If Kamala made an issue out of that, and she would, right? And Biden didn't want to pick her as VP the first time, right? And his arm was basically twisted, and he did everything he could to avoid it. So I talk about that in the book as well. Like her announcement was days late. She was on the schedule differently. She unfollowed Biden on Twitter as a hint of what was coming, and then he backed down and picked her. It was nuts. It was absolutely nuts. So there we go. Any thoughts on Obama's mother and stepfather having ties to the CIA? Well, I mean, there's a good book that gets into that, and it's written by Wayne Madsen. It's called The Manufacturing of a President. It's very good. It goes into great detail. But yeah, Ann Dunham, Obama's mother, she was Ford Foundation. She was doing research, and she was, she went to Indonesia. She married a top Indonesian military leader, and she was going around Indonesia doing research, she was getting paid lots of money to do research on the population, find out who the communists were, find out why people in Indonesia thought the way they did. That looks like intelligence stuff. The first job that Barack Obama had when he left college was with the International Business Corporation, which is a known CIA asset, front. Basically, Wayne Madsen's book does a great job showing that. I mean, Barack Obama and his family connections to American intelligence are massive. And that coup in 1965 in Indonesia, that was all the CIA. And it was Barack Obama's grandparents, the Bank of Hawaii, that laundered and funneled all the money to make that coup happen. Right. The coup in Indonesia that killed 500,000 people, that was Barack Obama's grandparents who basically arranged for the money to be transmitted to do all of that. They were the heads of the Bank of Hawaii. Barack Obama's grandmother was the first female president of the Bank of Hawaii. They try to portray Barack Obama's parents like, oh, they're just working class people from Kansas and all that. No. They were the presidents of a bank. Right. Is that what normal poor people do, is become presidents of a bank? It's like, and they tried to obscure that. Oh, he was raised by his family from parents in Hawaii, but they were just people from Kansas. It's like they were the presidents of a bank. OK, They're bank presidents. Do you think bank presidents are poor? Do you think bank presidents are just working class average Joes? I mean, his grandparents, his grandmother and his grandfather were both presidents of the Bank of Hawaii. They were on the board of directors of a huge bank that funneled money for the CIA. I mean, do I need to say more? Do I need to say more? I mean, it's very apparent. I showed the clip about Kamala and the school parents. Very vicious. And thank you, Funky, for the support. It is very much appreciated. Very, very appreciated. The only good thing about Tulsi for VP is stopping Kamala. Yeah, I mean, Tulsi Gabbard, she used her time on the debate stage in 2020 to go after Kamala Harris, and it was an epic political knockout. It was one of the most epic political knockouts. And since I wrote the book, I now know more about how it happened too. And I can't say more about it, but I mean, I know some of the background about how it happened, and I was absolutely right. I mean, there are differences in the ruling class between the Pentagon and the Hillary Clinton State Department. There are differences in the ruling class, and Tulsi Gabbard has many times said why she considers Kamala Harris dangerous, why the military is opposed to having Kamala Harris as president, and they're all pretty good reasons. So, all right. What is your opinion of LaRouche? Why do American leftists hate him? Well, I respect Lyndon LaRouche. I view him as a very, very smart man. And he was a Trotskyite communist in the 1960s, who realized, he basically came to the conclusion that what he called, the Eastern establishment, the Rockefellers, and what he started referring to as the British Empire or the British American establishment was the main danger. That put him at odds with the rest of the left, because at the time the left were, more or less, they were focused on fighting the military-industrial complex. Lyndon LaRouche was a bit ahead of his time, because at the time, it's true that the military-industrial complex was more hawkish in Vietnam and places like that, and that a lot of the trends that Lyndon LaRouche picked up on were not as true at the time. And Lyndon LaRouche, because he took this position that the Ford Foundation, that the Rockefellers, McGeorge Bundy, people like that were the main danger. He got into a pretty ugly fight with the Communist Party. We now know the FBI, COINTELPRO, was involved in making it happen. But he got into some pretty ugly fistfights with the Communist Party. And that then led to Lyndon LaRouche more or less having to position himself as aligned with Republicans. And he was a big supporter of Ronald Reagan, et cetera. And it was based on this position that has in the long term panned out to be correct, which is that the main danger, the biggest threat, comes from the ultra monopolies, not from the military-industrial complex, the lower levels of capital. And so I respect Lyndon LaRouche. I've learned a lot from his work. I quote him among other people in the new book I'm writing. I talk about him in chapter 4 about the divisions in the ruling class. I respect Lyndon LaRouche, but there's also a lot of things he said throughout his life I disagree with. And ultimately, he broke with Marxism. In the past, I've, given a platform to the people from his organization run by his widow, Helga Zepp-LaRouche. At this point, we have no relationship. I'd be happy to work with them again. I respect the work that they do. They're good anti-imperialists as far as I'm concerned. I respect Lyndon LaRouche. I draw a lot from his work. But at the same time, I'm critical. He broke with Marxism. He had some particular, fixations around music and things that I don't share, but I don't think he's a Nazi. I don't think he's anti-Semitic. I don't think he's a fascist. I think he just had a difference. The left focused on opposing the military-industrial complex, and that was a mistake. The fall of the Soviet Union wasn't carried out by the military-industrial complex. It was carried out by the upper levels, by the CIA, by the Eastern establishment. And, but LaRouche, in order to protect himself, he became aligned kind of with the Reagan Republicans, and that I would have had a hard time with that at the time, but I wasn't alive at the time, so there you go. Is there a connection between anarchism and fascism? Yes, there is. First of all, the theoretical individual who kind of laid the basis for Mussolini's fascist movement was George Sorel. In fact, there's a Mussolini said of all the thinkers, he owed the most to George Sorel, right? There's even here, I'll show you. George Sorel, his understanding of the spiritual nature of violence, which is a big part of Sorelianism. Also his understanding of the power of myth. He took the syndicalist wing, which is the anarchist wing that rejects all politics, that focuses just on the workplace, workers seizing their factories. He took the syndicalist movement into a direction of making it a useful counter gang to fight the genuine communist movement. Right? Benito Mussolini. I owe most to George Sorel, this master of syndicalism. By his rough theories of revolutionary tactics, has contributed most to the form of discipline, energy, and power of the fascist cohorts. Right? And George Sorel, a syndicalist, right? Anarcho-syndicalism is what a lot of anarchists call themselves. It's a wing of it was a socialist thinker in France who was all about action. Propaganda of the deed, the power of violence, the spiritual power of violence, not wanting to build a mass movement, but an isolated sect of armed men who engage in violent attacks, etc. So that's the connection. Both fascism and anarchism both glorify action and reject ideology. Both fascism and anarchism tap into people's libidinal desire to destroy and take revenge. They kind of work at cultivating people's adolescent rage rather than teaching them an ideology. They both are kind of destructive. So yes, there is a connection, and the roots of fascism go back to Sorelian syndicalism. All right, and thank you, Mia, for your support. There we go. Uhuru has a campaign called "Arrest the CPS." Oh, I'm sorry about that. Has a campaign called "Arrest the CPS," how the foster care system is part of the genocide against Black people in America. I've heard many people talk about how blatantly classist the CPS system is. If you lose your kids if you're Black and you're poor, and you keep your kids if you're wealthy and white. And it's not about actual abuse and things like that. And I've heard many people talk about the CPS system and how awful it is, and how often, the kids, maybe the situation in their home isn't so great, but they end up in a place that's worse. And there's human trafficking that's been exposed and things like that. And many people have talked about that. And that there's a lot of anti-CPS activism in urban areas, but poor white people have the same kind of complaints, right? This is an issue, I can talk about in other ways, but yeah, I think you're right about that. The way CPS operates is not helpful. Not helpful. All righty. Cool. Halfway through the new book, would recommend it. Well, hey, if you like it, drop a review on Amazon. That helps. It's still #1. This book is definitely changing the conversation around the Houthis. And we're doing the best we can. Very good. I'm glad you like it. The system is crashing and we're organizing. Well, thank you, NRJ. We are organizing, and that's what we are doing. We are building an in real life movement. I am not building a social media brand. I will say that over and over and over again. I am not building a social media brand. I am building a community of people to intervene in the historical process. And I have very exciting plans for what we can do to raise the awareness of Kamala Harris. I'm writing a plan right now about how we can spread the truth about Kamala Harris. And, I'm very excited at this point. And I've got there's a lot that we can do, but we can't do it alone as a social media brand, because social media is rigged. Social media is completely rigged, #1. And #2, you need comrades to keep your feet on the ground, to keep you grounded. It's about actually changing the world. But yeah, we're building an organization, and you should join it. You should join the Center for Political Innovation. Go to our website, cpiusa.org, and join. yes, we are organizing an in real life movement. Yeah, we are building it and we are marching ahead, and we need you. We need you to be part of it. Right? There's a lot happening. We are having our national retreat coming up. I guess I'll announce it one more time. We're having our national gathering that is coming up in Vermont. It's going to be a great national gathering, a 4-day education weekend to prepare for a summer where we will be involved in changing the course of the future of the country. So please sign up. If you are able to get to Vermont for our 4-day national training school, we need you there. We're building an organization. Everything I do is about building an organization. And we have a job that we've got to do. We got work that needs to be done. We have a movement that needs to be built. Ignore the haters. They are just jealous. You're actually publishing and writing. Also, organizing events. P.S. YouTube won't let me donate anymore. Damn. Well, thank you, GM. That's a Rumble rant I just received. So there you go. We are having a national event, on the weekend coming up, April 26th through the 29th. So be there, be there and attend and be part of what we're doing, because we're doing something very exciting and very, very amazing. So we need you to be part of it. We need you to be part of what we're doing. So please sign up and come to our national event, become a member of the Center for Political Innovation. We do great things at our retreats, and we do great operations to try and change the course of the country. So thank you, everybody. I am going to put on the closing music.
Surge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.